Hey YouTube! Welcome again to my channel Tyrannosaurus Girl. It's me, Prometea. I'm back with another video from my series Ask a Trans Woman. And the question I'm going to be answering today is, what is the difference between queer and non-binary? That is exactly how the question came in, and actually queer and non-binary do not have a lot to do with each other. One term can be in a way mostly used about sexuality and the other one about gender identity. So I think that what you actually meant to ask perhaps was the difference between genderqueer and non-binary, which are the terms that are closely related and most easily confused. But I'm going to address all of three anyway, because it's really no wonder that you are confused. I mean, these are subjects that we are only speaking about openly in relatively recent times. We're talking about, what, 10 years maybe? It's not the first time that those terms were used. They have been used for about 40 years, but back then it was more in radical places and in the fringes of society, if you will. And even today, because the LGBT community is not really a community, we were not raised together, we were not born in the same place, in the same culture, we do not live all together, different people still give different meanings to those terms, and they are not universally accepted. So to be absolutely honest with you, even I was confused about genderqueer and non-binary, and I had to do a lot of reading to be able to answer this question, and I didn't find just one answer. If you ask different people, they are going to give you different answers. I'm going to talk about what seems to be the most accepted and what made the most sense to me. But I'm sure that somebody is going to comment here and say, no, you're absolutely wrong, it means this and this and that. And yeah, it's fine if it does for you, but it's not for everybody. So let's start by talking about the word queer. So a little history lessons for the younger ones. The word queer is thought to come from the German word quer, which means like obliquous or diagonally off-center. So at first in English it was used to refer to anything strange, anything unsettling, anything out of the ordinary. And because of that it began to be used, and it's still used today, as a pejorative term against gay people, mostly gay men. But back in the 1980s, a movement began to reclaim that word. It was started by a group called the Queer Nation, and they justified it by saying, when we wake up in the morning we usually do not feel gay, which used to mean joyful, but angry and disgusted. We feel queer. And so began the process of reclaiming that word, initially to refer only to gay people. But queer nowadays is used to describe anybody who doesn't fit into these heteronormative ideas. So anyone who is not strictly straight or strictly cisgender, anyone that may be trans, may be gay, may be bi, anything that doesn't fit into this heteronormative traditional gender roles. So in that way it is also used by some straight people. It's called queer heterosexuality, and it's taken by some people who are cisgender, are straight, but they claim that word for themselves because they don't fit into traditional gender roles. So to give you an easy example, a stay-at-home dad may want to call himself queer. So it's a big umbrella term that is politically loaded. The usage of the word queer also has to do with intersectionality, because it is an umbrella term, so it's not so easy to separate us into little boxes, but rather to consider ourselves one common thing, despite some differences. Now, going to non-binary and genderqueer, I will start with non-binary, which is going to be the easiest. It refers to anybody whose gender is not binary. That's easy, right? So anybody who does not identify strictly as either a man or a woman. It may be a gender fluid person, someone whose gender identity shifts between man and woman. It may be someone who identifies as bigender or even agender, anything out of these binary gender identities of man and woman. So by definition, all non-binary people are trans because they don't identify with the gender that was assigned to them at birth, and nobody is assigned as non-binary. But not all trans people are non-binary, like me, for example. I am a trans woman. I identify as a woman, strictly speaking. So my gender identity, even though I'm trans, is strictly binary. Now, genderqueer refers in a way to this queerness, this strangeness, this oddity, but strictly when talking about gender. So it refers to anybody whose gender doesn't fit into these heteronormative ideas. But wait, isn't that what I just said about non-binary? Well, not exactly, because it's not defined just by gender identity, but also by gender expression and gender presentation. So somebody who may be cisgender and such binary may express their gender in a non-traditional way and present themselves in a non-traditional way. So they may choose to call themselves genderqueer. And of course also a binary trans person who also doesn't express their gender in a typical manner. So it's also an umbrella term, and you would think that it includes non-binary in it. But just like queer, genderqueer is also politically loaded. So it is also a reaction against heteronormativity and patriarchy. And because, as I said in the beginning of the video, we are not a real community and we don't agree on everything, some people that could be seen by others as genderqueer don't identify as such because they don't agree with the political ideas that come with the term. Because we are talking about identity, the first requirement to fit into any of these labels is that you identify as such. So if a person does not identify with a label, does not wish to use them, well, that's not what they are. So genderqueer and non-binary are both umbrella terms that have a lot in common. They have a big overlap, but they don't match quite exactly. So I hope to have clarified this a bit for you. Preparing this video has certainly been a very educational process for me also, and it even resulted in me beginning to apply the label queer to myself, because in addition to being trans and being a lesbian, I have recently also been racialized, because in Uruguay, where I live most of my life, this is considered white, but now that I live in Sweden, suddenly I'm Latina. Thank you very much for your question, for your comments, for your likes. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Feel free to leave your comments, your thoughts on this terminology, and any questions that you may have for me that you can send me either through the comments of the video or Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter and Ask FM. And well, see you again next week. Bye bye!